right, howdy everybody. Nice to see you guys here. Yeah, so this was a weird week, right? Weird and good in some ways, not so good in other ways. One of the band leaders that I had the privilege of working with has passed away this week. I've been very busy this week with a bunch of stuff, but one of the things that I'm doing is getting ready for a funeral tomorrow that the band is going to be playing at. So, and that's kind of a long story. Other news, the proof for the new book has come. And let me see, where do I have that? Maybe I'll walk you guys over there. I forgot where I put it. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Oh, all tangled up. So you guys got to see this. I love the cover. You know, with the covers, you want something that'll stand out, but without being too gaudy, right? Woohoo! Very pleased with this. Now, this is the first proof. And what happened was, it would have been all right, and I would have just said, because everything I'm looking at here looks good. That's what the proof is for, right? You send it, and you try to make sure that there's not any major errors or anything like that. And so I was going through after I ordered the first proof, because I told you guys this is coming. It's not coming with, but I'm releasing at the same time. Hello, Anthony. Happy Halloween. I'm releasing this the same time as I'm releasing two albums. One is an album of the duets, and then the other album is an album of the play along, right? So one track will be just the first trumpet, and the other track will be the second trumpet. And so I was doing that, and I had the music open, and I was flipping through to make sure that the recording I had matches this, right? And I got to What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And I'm looking at it, and something was off. And I realized, so someone had asked, it was Professor Kreifhagen. I think that's how you say his name. My Afrikaans is horrible. A guy who lives in the Western Cape in South Africa. He asked me, could I please transpose it to C, because him and his buddies play on C trumpet at church. So I did that, but I never remembered to transpose it back, so it's in the wrong key in the book. So I had to somehow that version of it ended up in the first proof. So I had to upgrade that, put it in the right key, and order a second proof, so that I could have left it there. I think all the notes fit. I looked at it, the notes fit, but it's not. Well, the problem would be it wouldn't fit with the play along, right? So yeah, I had to fix that. But yeah, everything looks good. I think it's very nice. People are gonna like it. Now the church, I gotta tell you guys. Anthony says, I saw an advertisement for heavy bottom and top caps for your trumpet pistons. What's your opinion on this? I don't use them. I want to say that first. But I understand why they work, how they work. And I don't know why I haven't used them. It might be a money thing. And so it's not so much that those individual items are expensive. It's that once you cross that line, where does it stop, right? You start buying every mouthpiece that makes sounds like it makes sense. You start buying all this stuff, and let me tell you what my opinion is about the money, right? Because this is what I do for a living. It would be very different if this was not what I was doing for a living. And I think one way you could summarize how I look at this is to look at how I behave if I go on tour. So like I've done out of town trips. Some of my favorites have been like I went to Nantucket one time for the weekend. I've been to Las Vegas for New Year's Eve, I think 5 years in a row. We played at the Golden Nugget. We did 2 separate trips to California. One was in Wineland, the Sonoma Valley or whatever that's called up there, or Sonora Valley, whatever it's called, up north of San Francisco. And then one was in more farther south. And everybody else looks at this as a time to party and go see stuff, sightseeing and gamble and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, if I spend that money there, then the gig is paying me less. You see what I'm saying? So if the gig pays, like, for example, I think we were making about $800 to go to, I'm saying about, right? I don't want to but it was about $800 to go to Las Vegas for New Year's Eve. And, if I spend, because they give you meal tickets and stuff like that, if I say, oh, I don't want that food, I want to go eat at a nice restaurant, I want to go do some gambling, I want to see some shows, you could come back with just $400 easily. And now you get back and you're like, how much money did I really make on this trip to Las Vegas? The truth is, you only made $400 if you spent half of it, right? Same thing with a gig. There's a lot of them that on like if you play at a restaurant, a lot of them give you 50% off the food that they have there. But even at 50% off, you're still spending more than you would at home, which means that the money you're making on the gig is disappearing, right? So when I go home, I want to have, this is what I do for a living, right? I want to have a profit, right? And and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm not so much into the technology stuff, is because, I mean, you know what I mean, like the equipment. That's what I meant, not technology. Into the equipment is because it's going to cut my bottom line. It helps with the taxes a lot, but still, right? Anyway, so yes, that's the big thing for me. So. And I guess I haven't gotten to your answer. My opinion, I don't do them. I don't have a problem with people that do. There are scientific reasons why they work. Okay? And the way I feel about it, if there's somebody who this is their hobby and they have the money, why not buy that stuff? Right? If you have the money and this is just something you're doing to enjoy yourself, enjoy, expressing yourself or whatever, what's wrong with having a even the most expensive valve caps and valve tops, right? There's all kinds of stuff you can put on your trumpet, like those very nice pearls that go on the top, right? If this was my hobby, I'd be doing all of that. So, I would want new horns and all of that. So, anyway, what other questions do we have? Yeah, I'm not the kind of person that gets emotional about stuff, right? I do kind of get moody sometimes, but that's what people call moody when they look at me and they say, oh, you're being moody, is what it is I'm thinking. and I'm just not paying attention to what's going on around me because I'm like so deep into my head. But it wouldn't be an understatement to say that this band leader passing away has affected me, right? Like I said, I'm not an emotional type person. Emotion is something I put into the horn, not something I feel like directs my path day to day, right? But I have definitely been impacted by his passing. It just makes me, that's how I am, right? It makes me think about a lot of stuff I hadn't thought about. So, hello, Joseph. I just wanted to say I made Region Jazz 5th chair. Woohoo! Congratulations. Congratulations. Yeah. Great to hear from you. And thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah. So, how did you feel about the way they did the auditions this year? I'm not a real big fan of that, really. I'm not a big fan of that at all. I've made myself very clear on that subject in every idiom that I can. Every medium that I can. I think it would have been better. I don't know. I think it would have been better to wait. But then I could see how they have trouble with that kind of idea. Joseph says, I had to really focus on getting excellent recordings instead of perfection. Well, there you go. Sounds like you watched my video. Anthony says, I spend my money on piston oil and cleaning equipment for trumpets or cleaning gauze to keep the horn clean and working condition. That's a good investment there, huh? Joseph says, or I would get lost in the music, and I did. Yeah? Yeah. All right. What other questions do we have or comments? I like hearing from you guys when you say, hey, I accomplished this. That's to me, that's what this is all about, right? You know? And it doesn't have to necessarily be a contest. You could say, I've been working on the Haydn trumpet concerto for 3 months, and now I can play it, you know? Joseph says, I did watch your video, not get lost in the music. Sorry for not clarifying. That's cool. But yeah, anyone that wants to share what they've accomplished here, that's, you know, let me tell you about how I teach, right? One of the reasons I like teaching independently of all the schools is because the schools have a say over how you're supposed to do it. And this was true from the very beginning. The very first school I taught at, the band directors wanted me to report to them about the progress of the student. And on the surface, this sounds like a great thing, right? That band director's interested. But what the band director really wants is to be in control. And in our lessons, we don't work that way. It's your goals in our lessons, not my goals, and not the band director's goals. And yes, it makes the way I teach a lot more difficult because I can't just say, okay, student, you're here. Bam, 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 do that. And when you're done with that, we're going to bam, 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 do that. I have to actually assess every student individually. I have to first figure out where it is you want to go. Then I have to figure out where it is you are right now. And it's amazing the difference from one student to the next. One student will be somewhere different from the other student, and where they want to go is a different place too. So I have some high school students that are just not interested in all region and all state. So what? And the band directors don't approve of that. A lot of times, if their best trumpet student says, no, I'm not actually interested in all region, that would, in a way, that would give me a bad reputation, right? Because I'm not going along with the herd. But the way I teach is I assess what the student wants. Now, of course, if you're a beginner, you actually don't know what you want yet. So we do work just on general stuff with the beginners. But as you progress and as you get better, now the adults know what they want. That's one of the differences with the adults. The adults come in here, they know what they want. Most of the time, and it's because they listen to music. It's very unusual to have an adult student, come into the studio who doesn't know what they want, and they always got there because of all the listening that they did. Imagine that, right? You spend your life. When I say adult, we're talking about people in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Up. The oldest person I taught was in his 90s. Think about it. You're living your life, and there's music in your life. And over the course of your life, you are exposed to this trumpet stuff, and it piques your interest. And then you start leaning more towards the trumpet stuff, and then you slowly, over time, these guys end up developing a love for trumpet. These guys have such a passion for trumpet, right? And so, yes, when they come into the lesson, they know what they want. And that makes my job a lot easier, right? I don't have to figure out what they want. They know. One of my favorite students to use as an example, and yeah, he's one of my favorite students too. He came in here, I think, I won't say how old he was. Let's just say he's already established as a professional in his field. And he came in here and he says, I want to sound like Chet Baker. That's his goal. It's been his goal this whole time. Now, he's been taking lessons with me for years now. He started off as an absolute beginner. And we've been studying. I told him that there were basics that he had to do to get to that level first. Right? And he was okay with that. I've had other, this whole thing about what the student wants. Some people just don't get it, right? One guy told me he wants to be able to play that song, but he didn't want to learn any of the skills that it took to learn that song, and it just wasn't possible. Some songs are not accessible that way. Okay, Joseph. Joseph says, I got to go to class. Thanks for the chat. Really appreciate it. Nice to have you here. Happy Halloween, Joseph. Anthony says, I want to look like Chris Bodie. I don't think I can help you with that. I don't think that's something you'll get from your trumpet teacher, huh? I went to his concert. I would not have normally gone to his concert. He had a concert in the Opera Hall in Galveston. But my student, the same student we're talking about, he had tickets and he couldn't go. He gave me the tickets. And I have to say, that's the best concert I ever went to. What an awesome player. And the judging by the recordings he makes, I wasn't all that impressed because they were very commercial recordings, and you make that error in judgment. At least I do. That error in judgment, just because someone does commercial stuff, you assume that they're not capable of the more artistic stuff. And with him, he's definitely capable. I was actually almost shocked how virtuosic he was in that performance. Not that that matters. I'm not saying that I would only have been impressed if he was virtuous. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that was there, and totally unexpected. But also the depth of feeling and all that. I couldn't say enough about it. Fleming Strom says, what is the best way to learn to improvise? Well, so here's the thing. There's two different, when we talk about jazz improvisation, that's two different subjects. So the way you word it here, what is the best way to learn to improvise? That's a general overall statement, right? An overall question. And improv is spontaneous composition. So I would say just for improv, not jazz improv, because jazz is actually two subjects. When we say jazz improv, you're trying to learn two things at the same time. Okay? Jazz, you have to learn how to improvise, but you also at the same time have to learn the jazz language. I just scratched myself, sorry. You also have to learn the jazz language, and that's a lifelong pursuit, really. And what I do with my students is we just get started on the language, but we spend a lot of time learning how to improvise. So how do you learn how to improvise outside of the jazz idiom? The first thing you should do is take a scale that you're working on. And I like to do what I call the improvisation expansion. I love expansion exercises, and it works just as well with improvisation as it does with all the other stuff I use it for. Okay? An improv expansion is when you start with just one note. Yes, I got blood all over the place. Sorry about that. It's very emphasized in the screen. It looks bright red. It doesn't look that way when I put my finger up like that. It's brighter on the screen than it is in person. So I apologize for that, for those of you who are grossed out by blood. So the improv expansion, and let's say, I'm going to pick a weird scale. Let's say we're going to do what I would call the E Persian Minor. Okay, so the E Persian Minor is E, F sharp, G, A sharp, B, C, D sharp, back to E. Okay, so to do the expansion exercise, you just start with one note. I'm going to start with B natural. Notice I'm not playing jazz. You can apply this to jazz as well, okay? But since you didn't say jazz, we're talking about improvisation. Now, what I'm doing now is improvising on one note. And if it's just one note, you're just playing a rhythm that's interesting, right? Now we're going to add one note to that, okay? So we're going to add A sharp right now. Okay, and you do, if the better you want to be, the longer you stretch each stage out. Okay, if we were doing an expansion on a chord or a scale or something like that, then that would be 10 times. We don't have the equivalent for this except for the amount of time that you spend. So you should be spending more on each of these stages than what I'm spending now. Okay? Now we're going to add the note C. And you would do that for a while too. Just making stuff up with 3 notes. It's amazing. You know, I've done this exercise with absolute beginners. In fact, that's how I ended up making it up, because I was teaching absolute beginners and they wanted me to teach them how to improvise. And it's amazing because anyone can do this and sound good now. That's my whole thing about improv, right? The way I teach improv, I want you to sound good now. Now. So we have this sort of foot in the door approach to all this stuff, right? Stuff you can do that makes you sound good now. Let's add another note. We're going to do G now. Okay, now we're going to add, and like I said, keep going. Don't say, oh, I've done that already, go on to the next one. The more time you spend on each one of these stages, the better. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I'm going to add D sharp. And then we're going to add the F sharp below. And like I said, do it out, keep it out longer. Then we're going to add the E. I accidentally played an E. Now, when you're doing this and you have something that you accidentally played instead of the ones that you're trying to limit yourself to, we actually applaud that, because this is not a rule you're supposed to be following. These are prompts that help you become more creative with your horn. And if something else came out, that's part of that creative process. So we don't go, oh, I played a wrong note. Oh, right? No. What we do is say, oh, that was interesting. And if it wasn't interesting, you're like, well, that was something, right? So that's what we do. This is the very first exercise that I give somebody if they want to learn how to improvise. This is your first step. Now, I'm going to stress again, this is not jazz improv. This is just improv. And really, I think the first step to learning jazz improv is to learn how to improvise. I hope that makes sense. So Javier says, hello, Javier. Nice to see you again. It says, you said that you don't stop if a mistake is made while you are studying. Well, let me be clear about that. I try not to, right? Sometimes, even in the lesson, sometimes you get so messed up you can't help but stop. But yes, you're right. I try not to stop. You just keep going or stay playing in right a couple of times. Or just keep going or stay playing it right a couple of times. Okay, so it depends on the process, right? So let's say you're doing, like one of the stages that I teach for learning a song, right, is this working backwards stage where you start at the end, you start at the last notes, and you add measures until you get to the beginning. Now, and you're going to break it down into bits that are usually so easy that you don't make mistakes, right? So I'm just going to grab something. I have this new book, right? So if I'm going to look for one that has, so here's Softly and Tenderly. We're going to do just the last two measures, right? Now you'll do that 10 times. If you crack a note in the middle of that, or if you play E natural, that's a better example, right? So by playing E natural, it made me mess up on all the rest of it, but I actually finished it up. Now, if what I just played was too hard for me to get it right, then that means I bit off more than I could chew. So at that point, you stop repeating that. Maybe you'll go to just one measure, or maybe you have to slow something down. Or so yes, you stop the process, but you should never stop the flow of the music. Right? So let's say you try once and you can't get it, you try twice, you can't get it. You still finished it off, right? Right? So you tried it, you got all these wrong notes. Still followed through, still didn't stop and try to fix stuff. But you better now, like for what I just did, I would have to look at the music and say, what did I do wrong here? And if it's something that's a fingering thing that you need to figure out, get the fingering thing figured out. Get that worked out. If it's something that's more of a lip thing, that's when you get your mouthpiece. Sing it first. If you do solfeggio first. And then do the mouthpiece. That's if it's a interval problem or something. If it's an articulation problem, break it down, right? But you're going to stop doing the 10 times thing, which is what you were originally trying to do. And that's always been my approach, is you stop the process. Don't stop the music. I hope that's answering your question. You stop the process. Don't allow yourself to keep going. I hope that makes sense. So Anthony said, Eddie, you started this improv on E flat minor? No, it was E. I know the B flat is confusing, isn't it? It's E. Some people call it double harmonic minor. It's a double harmonic minor. So regular E minor is E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D sharp, E. This is regular minor. Regular harmonic minor, right? If you make it A sharp instead. Now, I've been calling that the Persian minor. There's a bunch of different names for it. I think sometimes the names are different depending on what note you start on. I either call it a double harmonic minor or a Persian minor. But there's a lot of names. Arabic minor. Now, you can do different modes of it. And that's something I've only played around with for a little bit. I'm trying to remember. I actually wrote a piece that has this in it. Okay, it's like this, I think. Oh, I can't remember now. Oh, I remember now. I got it. That if you use that same exact scale but make it an E flat scale. I played one wrong note, but you get the idea. That way you have a major tonic, right? If you do that scale starting on that note, it sounds like an E flat major. How cool is that, right? That's why I've been practicing them, because they are very cool. Like we refer to them as exotic scales, right? So that's probably my favorite exotic scale. And that mode of it is very cool because it can be minor or major, right? You can emphasize minor or you can emphasize major. So both of those are in that. How cool is that, right? Okay, so like I was saying, if other notes come out, you don't criticize yourself for that. So yeah, it's such a cool, beautiful skill. Very cool skill. Not much use for it in more mainstream jazz, but on the more free gigs that you might do, that would be a very nice scale to plug in there. But I will say this about those scales: probably not a good idea to learn those until after you've learned all the other scales. And what scales should they be? Let's go through the list real quick. Major scales: harmonic minor. We don't practice natural minor. Harmonic minor, melodic minor, pentatonic. And when we say pentatonic, we mean do, re, mi, sol, la, right? No altered notes. We're not talking about do, re, mi, okay? So it's not C, D, E flat. It's C, D, E natural, G, A, pentatonic, like that. And then after pentatonic, you should know your, of course, chromatic scale, your whole tone scale, the diminished scale, and then if you are into such things, you can learn the augmented scale and then these other more exotic things. Okay. Gary Sheehan says, do you practice improvise with whole tone scales as well? I do. Now, let me tell you what my stance is on scales right now. I don't practice this stuff to use it in a solo. Okay? I will do improv with a scale like what I showed you earlier. I will improv as a way of exercising that skill. And no, some of the wrong notes are coming out. Okay, I just played, ended on another wrong note. But getting the intervals and all that stuff to flow freely, you really should spend time improvising using that skill. Now, I am extremely opposed to the practice of saying in my head, right, I'm on a gig and I'm improvising and I say, oh, a whole tone scale would sound real good right here. Right? And you can tell, I used to do more judging than I do now, than I have lately. But you can tell when someone's thinking scales. And it's not nice. I tell my students, when you're thinking scales, that's what people are hearing is scales. Okay? So I'm not a big I think we should learn scales, but here's what I was going to say. The purpose of learning scales, this is my stance on scales right now. The purpose of learning scales is for ear development, ear training. It's not for technique. Technique is easy. Technique is easy. Hearing it is a whole different issue. And that's why we do all the different scales in a rotation. So I do the same tonalization studies on the whole tone scale as I do on all the other scales. And then same sequence of patterns and intervals. Number 9 would be like this. Number 10, 11, 12 would be like this. It starts getting hard after that. So like number 13, right? And then I just love number 17. Right? I don't normally do that stuff in front of people. I'm making mistakes. That last note I played was the wrong note. I don't care. But yes, I do practice with whole tone. How often do I use whole tone scale in my improv? Like I said, I don't use scales. I don't think, this scale would be cool right here, right? So actually using, that's what I'm trying to say. So there is a pattern associated with whole tone. Right, there is that. And sometimes I'll play that, but I'm not thinking to myself, oh, let me play the whole tone scale here. Right? I'm not doing that. It's a sound that I hear. That's why I say it's ear training. It's a sound that you hear, and sometimes you plug in the sound. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm shaking the... Sometimes you hear that sound in your head and you play a sound because you know that sound will sound good over this. But I'm not thinking of it as a scale. But I wouldn't have that sound in my ears if it hadn't been for practicing the scale. I think practicing scales is crucial. I just don't think they should be used as improv material. Now, that exercise I showed you earlier about the scale improv expansion, that's an exercise. That's an exercise to get you started with improvising. Okay, so we don't actually do scales when we're improvising. Anyway, Anthony says, I was playing an Arvin's duet with my teacher. Looked easy, and I just had so much trouble getting these 2 measures right. Finally got it when I went home and practiced 20 minutes, maybe not that much. Yes, I had to slow it down a lot. Yes, so you know, a lot of stuff that, you know, even as a composer, there's times when I write stuff, and you know, since I have to record it here to make the product videos, right? There's a lot of times I think I wrote something that would be great for like a beginner or something, and I sit down to play it, and I have difficulty with it, things that I didn't expect. So yeah, sometimes looks can be deceiving, right? Javier says ear training is more like a lick goes in your head and you insert it. I mean, play it, not insert it, right? Well, think about what happens. I think too often we think of ear training as how well do I hear the notes? But when we're talking about scales and arpeggios and stuff like that, we're not hearing individual notes, we're hearing groups of notes, right? So that last exercise that I showed you, there's that right note. That has a very specific sound to it. And it sounds even cooler when you flip it, right? That sounds even cooler. And there's times when you're playing the song and that's what's appropriate. That's what. So when I say I hear that, I'm not necessarily hearing that as a melody. What I'm hearing is that sound of that combination of notes. And having done, you know what some people do is they say, so you know, there's that second chord in A Train, right? A lot of people will tell their students to play at that point the E or whatever it is, because it's a symmetric scale, right? It's E, F sharp, G, A flat, or whatever. They'll tell them to play that whole tone scale. Right? They'll tell them to play that. But that's a scale. And okay, so yeah, sometimes you might play a scale. And maybe that's the thought that you had. But if that's what you do all the time, if that's how you play, then your improv starts to sound like a bunch of it. And I love these etudes, but Sigmund Herring has a lot of etudes that are just arpeggios and scales and arpeggios and scales. There's no melodic content to them. And so your improv starts sounding like a Sigmund Herring etude. So yeah, to me, I hope that's clear enough what I'm saying. When I say ear training, I'm talking about, you know what? I went to a Tim Higgins masterclass, right? And he said that he used to sit down and play like a chord on the piano, and then he would play in the right hand every note over that chord for a while. So let's say D minor 7, blung, and he'd play E flat, which does not fit, right? But he'd play it over and over again, blum, 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 until he hears what that sounds like. And there's no, you know, I hope that makes sense. Then he'll do the E natural, blum, 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 and let his mind absorb. Oh yes, that's what that sounds like. And then he'll play the F sharp, blum, 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 right? And he's checking all of these notes, and he's letting all of that sink into his ears, so that he hears that not as necessarily a wrong note, but as a relationship between that note and the other notes. Okay? And what I'm talking about is the same kind of thing as that, except it's not vertical, it's more horizontal. These sequences of notes have a certain sound to them. And when you perceive things in bigger packages, it makes it all go faster anyway. That's the bottom line. Joel Torres says, hello, Joel. Do you look at the chords and play based on that, or just play along to what you're hearing? I've been learning to improvise, and I just play along with what sounds good and not really focusing much on chords. Okay, so what I tell my students is what you're doing now is the first step. I don't think you can do the other one without doing this first. The people who try to teach, they try to shortcut it and try to go to learning how to play chords by looking at them. That always sounds awful to me. I can tell it a mile away. So you have to do what you're doing first. I'll never forget. There's a trombone player, Andre Hayward. Right now he lives in Austin, but he has been, if I'm not mistaken, a trombone player in the Thelonious Monk band. I think he played in Wynton Marsalis's band for a while, the Lincoln Center Jazz Band. I think he was there. He used to teach, if I'm not mistaken, in Connecticut for a while. Now he lives in Austin, and he's doing some adjunct teaching down there, I think. But when he was 18 years old, him and I would go to these jam sessions together. He's a trombone player. But he knew I always carried my flugelhorn with me. And he would come up to me all very modestly and say, Eddie, can I borrow your flugelhorn? And I said, sure, take my flugelhorn. And we'd go up and we'd play tunes together. He's 18 at that time. I think I'm 26, around 26 maybe. Maybe not quite that old, but probably around that. And he would kick my butt. He was awesome all the way back then. On flugelhorn, that's not even his instrument. He's a trombone player. And he played better than me. He says because he played baritone in school, right? And there was one time when he played this something over this chord, and on the break I said, on that chord you did this, and that, and he said, "Oh, did I?" And I was shocked by that he wouldn't have known what he played on the chord. And it turns out he didn't actually know the chords for the song. He was playing the changes better than I was, and he didn't know what the chords were. Now, he was 18. I'm not saying that today he doesn't know what the chords are. Obviously, today he knows what the chords are. I'm talking about when he was 18 years old. And, that really opened my mind. We should all be learning to play by ear first, above all else. When it comes to improvisation, the first step is to play by ear. Then, over a long period of time, we learn self-control, we learn how to read, we learn a bunch of skills. I actually believe that the best way to play chord progressions is through the language. I demonstrated that last week. So, like, if I'm playing, I don't know, I'm not thinking about what is this chord, what is that chord, what is that chord. I'm using language that emphasizes different chords. Okay? And you know what? When you play that way, it actually speaks. This is not just a funny way to play with the words. When you use the language that way, it actually does speak in a way that chords and scales and all that stuff can't. So, but yes, there's times when you have to. You get to a gig, you've never heard the song before, and you're sight reading, and you're expected to take a solo. You better be able to read the chords, and you better be able to play the right notes that go, in that kind of gig. It's usually like a dance gig or something like that. You better be able to read the chords. So my answer to you is, in the long run, you got to be able to do both. But in the short term, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Okay? Learn to play by ear first and then expand from there. That's that word again, expansion. I love the whole expansion concept. So much of what I teach is rooted in this expansion. It's a foot in the door, right? People talk about getting your foot in the door. You start with what you can already do. Start with what you can already do. And then add in increments until you get what you want. And so, yes, definitely, the way you're approaching it, that's how we want to do it. Now, Javier says, this famous guitarist I won't name, he plays so clean and square that it's boring. That's a phenomenon. Later the same day, I saw Schofield, and he is not as that clean, but he is so cool and authentic. Yep. Yep. There are trumpet players like that. And, some of the other guys just love the way they play. And I think it's because they play so perfect and clean. But I just don't get that. How can you, I don't know. I don't even strive for that in my improv. It's funny, if you look at my improv videos, and most of you guys know this already, right? I have almost 100 free improvisation videos on YouTube. And if you look at my fingers, there's a lot of times when I'm going to notes, that's not the right fingering for that note. And what that means is I was shooting for a different note and something else came out. Right? And it's like, but I've been doing this free improv stuff for so long, you just learn to accept what comes out. And yes, there's a certain amount of risk involved in all of this. There's a certain amount of risk. It's not supposed to be clean and pretty. So yeah, I agree with you, Javier. Joel says, thank you so much for the info. Yes, you're welcome. Do you think it's okay if we add things we think sound cool to the region jazz etudes, like grace notes, etc., or play what's on the page? You know what? There's no answer to that question. There's no answer to that question. Okay? It really depends on who. Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you. It really depends on who the judge is. Me personally, let me tell you a story. And I won't name names because, sometimes when I compliment people, they don't take it the right way and they get very angry with me. But I had a student, he was by far the best improvising student I ever had. By far my best improviser ever. I got him in the middle of his junior year. And by the way, his father was my student when he was in high school. So I hope that's not too much info. I don't want to give away who it was. He was the best improvising student that I ever had. And when he did those kind of things that you're asking about, he sold it. He made it sound like, yes, That etude should have always been done that way. And when he played the etudes for me, I'm thinking, this is absolutely professional level stuff. It's professional level stuff. He's playing the etudes well. He's doing the improv perfectly. Everything, and it had his personality all over it. He didn't make region. And I'm absolutely convinced that the reason he didn't make region was because they probably had some judges in there that thought he was breaking too many rules by adding his own interpretation, his own like what you're talking about, grace notes. So you only say grace notes there, but you can add turns and you can add stuff like that, bends and stuff. There's a lot of stuff like that, right? And you have to decide for yourself, what is it that you want? Do you want to win, or do you want to be true to who you are? And those two things don't always go together, unfortunately. And you know why? The reason why is because when you're honest about who you are as a musician, automatically there's going to be a certain population, a certain percentage of the population that's not going to like what you do. That's a fact of life, not just for students, for everybody. I was amazed when I got online and see how many people have such horrible, horrible things to say about Wynton Marsalis. Arguably one of the best trumpet players from my generation, right? Not arguably. That's the wrong word to say. He, without question, one of the best trumpet players from my generation. And there's so many people who find fault in him. If he's getting that kind of criticism, what makes us think that if we're true to ourselves that we won't also get that same criticism? You see what I'm saying? So I think that's what happened to my student. I think he laid it all out there, and I think they didn't like what they heard. Does that mean he wasn't better than everybody else? Of course, that doesn't mean anything like that. Okay? So if you want to play perfectly so you can make off state, then you stick to what's on the page. That's how I see it. But if you want to go in there and maybe get first chair, it's a gamble, right? If you go in there, do your own thing and make it and really sell it, yes, there's a chance that some of the judges won't like it, but there's also a chance that the ones who do like it are going to like it so much they're going to put you first chair. You see that? I hope that makes sense. Gabriel, yes, we said hello. Javier says, perfect tone is beautiful, but is not fun. I have another story about that too. I love Chet Baker's tone after he got his mouth screwed up. Yeah. I have a story to tell about a band. I won't tell you who the band is, but they were reputed as being one of the best. And the reason they were so good is because their tone and their intonation were impeccable. It was a college group, and they had a reputation of having impeccable tone and impeccable intonation. I went to the concert, and yes, for the first half of the first song, it was so beautiful that I almost cried, and I don't cry. And when I say I almost cried, that means I didn't cry. So, but it was gorgeous, 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 like angels from heaven, right? Then after the first song, I'm thinking, boy, I found myself looking at my watch. I don't wear a watch anymore, but back then I had a watch, and I'm like, we're only past the first song, and I'm like, when is this going to be over? Because it was dreadfully boring. And I have a theory about that, right? I have a theory. What it takes to be more expressive is to push the boundaries of your instrument, and those boundaries affect your tone, and those boundaries also affect your intonation. So that's my theory. People can disagree with it if they want. That's my theory. If it's perfectly in tune and it has a beautiful sound, then chances are it's not very expressive. Because I think those two things are they counteract each other. Howell says, so it's risky. Some might not like it and others will. That's what I was thinking. So I didn't do anything, but I wanted to. Yeah, you know what? You have to look at your priorities. What do you want to accomplish? If you want to make All-State, probably, if that's what's important. And I told my student that. I said, you make a choice. You want to make All-State or you want to be true to yourself? He wanted to be true to himself. And I applaud him for that. I applaud him for that. I'm actually very proud of that student. I actually haven't heard from him since he went to college. I hope he's doing well because he deserves to do well. Javier says, "Oh right, Marcellus is so bad." Gabriel says Louis Maggio was much better after his accident. Yes, this happens. This happens. That accident that he had. Wow, I think he was in like Minnesota or something like that, right? St. Paul or something like that. And he was walking to his car or something, slipped on the ice, fell, and you know those bumps that they have at the side of the road to keep people from going over the side? Bam, right in his mouth, he lost all his teeth. And it shredded the muscles in his lips. So, you know who else had an accident like that was Rafael Mendes. Rafael Mendes was in a pit. This is, a lot of this might just be urban legend, right? He was in the pit and the door was here. Someone slammed the door open and it bashed him in the mouth. And another, I think it was Bud Herseth of the Chicago Symphony who got in an accident and the steering wheel popped him in the mouth. All three of these people had to learn how to play all over again because once the muscles give out, it's a whole different way. But you know what? That's evidence. The fact that they could play again after that is evidence of this balance we've talked about before. It's not just the lips. It's not just the lips. Playing the trumpet is not just the strength of your lips that gives you that ability. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, it looks like we're over time. Good hanging out with you guys. Nice to see you again. Things we're going to pick up. And I still have, I have a gig on the 15th. But I also had another gig that was rescheduled into December. Got a message last night. Canceled again because of this virus. So, this for as long as that's going on, I will keep having this on every Friday like we have been. Originally, it wasn't supposed to be every Friday. because I get gigs on Fridays, right? And sometimes I just can't commit to any much further. Did I start earlier? No, I didn't start earlier. Well, that's something my wife wanted me to warn you guys. We are going into, so for those of you who are either in Arizona or international, we are going into daylight saving time or coming out of daylight savings time. So it will be an hour later for those of you who are outside the country, starting next week, because we go back an hour on Saturday night. So what might have happened, I think maybe in Europe the clocks changed already. I don't know. Our clocks don't change until Saturday night. So maybe that's what's happening. Okay. So yeah, we change with you guys by Saturday night. So it'll be back on schedule the way it was next week. Okay. All right. Well, God bless you guys. Great hanging out with you. And we'll see you next time. All right. Stay safe. We'll see you. Bye.